Welcome to the Good Business Dufferin podcast, hosted by the Dufferin Board of Trade through our social enterprise, the Dufferin Biz Hub. Our podcast is based on our belief that small businesses have the power to drive positive change in our community. Whether you're looking to grow your business, strengthen our community, or hopefully both, we've got you covered.
Hello, I'm Diana Morris, Executive Director of the Dufferin Board of Trade and the Dufferin Biz Hub, and I'm excited to bring you another insightful episode today of Dufferin Good Business. Our guest is Sherry-Ann Bedminster, founder of SACB Consulting and a sustainability expert who works with small and medium-sized businesses to help them reduce their environmental impact and thrive in an increasingly eco-conscious world. In this episode, we'll explore how businesses embrace sustainability, why it matters, and the simple steps you can take to start your sustainability journey. Whether you're looking to enhance your environmental efforts or curious about the bottom line benefits of going green, this conversation will inspire and inform. But before we dive in, I'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, E. Hoffman Plastics, for their generous support. Thank you for helping us bring this important conversation to life. Let's get started. So Sherry-Ann, what is a sustainability consultant and what do you do for businesses?
Hi, thanks for having me. So first I'll say, let's talk about what sustainability is. Sustainability consulting is really about working with businesses to help them be adaptable, resilient in a way that is good for the planet, as well as the communities in which they're licensed to operate. And what that means for small and medium-sized businesses is that you're helping them do so in a way that is practical, that is achievable, that makes sense for their business, given how many hats they wear on a daily basis. As a sustainability consultant, my goal and the way that I work with clients is to help them, integrate some of these environmental practices as well as social and governance into their daily operations so that they're achieving the things that we just spoke about. And the way that I do that is I do it through assessments. So understanding with a business where they're at. And then from those assessments, identifying some of the solutions that perhaps they can implement in a way that is manageable and suits and aligned to their strategy as well as suits their budget. We look at ways I help them set targets and goals because what gets measured gets done. And so it's super important that if you're going to work at it, that you're able to set goals and targets and measure towards that. I help them implement. So once you set these goals and targets, you need to prioritize and bring it down to a point that makes sense for them because you can't work on 20 things at once. And through implementing, sometimes I'm helping them meet with things like compliance and regulations because there are certain things that they need to, whether they're looking at environmental policies or they're trying to get certified for a certain certification, it's helping them achieve those things. And then there are things like helping them sort of tell their story, because if you're working on sustainability, it's nice to be able to tell the story in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so engaging with their employees, their customers, their partners like suppliers, etc., that's also key. And then I do work with in terms of educating and empowering them themselves to be able to work through some of these sustainability practices. And the way I do that is through a number of workshops or training sessions, typically with management and staff.
Wow, that's a very fulsome offering that you have to help small businesses. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. What inspired you to do this and how are your qualifications for this?
What inspired me, I think it's deep rooted in who I am and where I come from and where I'm at this stage in life. I'm from the islands, and so I'm from Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago. And first of all, even before we were zoning into the fact that we in Canada were getting these floods and heat waves, etc., islands were experiencing hurricanes that were just beyond belief. We've always had hurricanes, but they were just stronger and causing so much more damage when they came through. And so So that was in tune for me. And then I did my MBA and I worked through sustainability. And really, the justice, the social justice piece spoke to me because you're understanding that for you to have certain luxuries, other folks um, uh, struggling, to provide those luxuries. And so that was also keen for me. My background is finance. So I've worked in banking for a number of years. And so once I chose to leave that career, I decided that I wanted to do something about it. I figured that I had to be one of the persons to help solve. And so from my banking background, I have worked as a corporate account manager. I have led teams that looked after business clients. And so that naturally, um, you know, aligned with where I felt I could have an impact. And that's in working with businesses. And I chose to work with small and medium sized businesses because I felt that being a smaller consulting company, I could be closer to the ground with them as well as be more affordable. So that was important to me. I didn't just decide to do it and off I went. I did go off and I did a couple of programs first to dig deeper into climate and what was happening there and how it was impacting businesses, society, individuals. And then I also did a program after I decided that consulting is the route I wanted to go to. I did a program to understand the hows. How do you calculate? How do you report, etc.
Wow, that's amazing. What a long but wonderful journey to do, and you're so qualified to do what you do. That is fantastic. You touched a little bit on the term ESG, which we do talk about in our Level Up Dufferin training: environmental, social, and governance. Can you expand a little bit on how that helps businesses?
ESG policies are so important because what it allows a company to think about is go beyond just thinking about the bottom line. And so it allows you to think about your environmental impact. It allows you to think about some of the social policies that you've got in place, as well as what you should truly be doing around governance. And I can tell you, environmentally speaking, most businesses have got to do some work there. But sometimes they think policies in place to address social and governance, and there's a real aha moment. So it encompasses all three. It's important because climate risk is a business risk. And so, yeah, it's important to be sustainable in terms of profitability. But if you can't future proof your business, there is no profitability. And this is something that will impact us all. It's also important because while there aren't regulations right now that says that you must do or thou shalt do, I do believe that that's at some point going to come. And so working through those ESG policies right now will help a business get ahead, prepare, and think about where they need to go in terms of future-proofing their business.
That's so important because future proofing is what we're talking about. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? If we have the policies in place before we're mandating, it will be so much further ahead. That's excellent advice. What are some misconceptions, though, that small businesses might have about sustainability?
A couple key ones. One is that it's costly. So especially in the small and medium-sized business space, businesses feel that in order to work at sustainability, there's a trade-off for profitability. And that's usually the opposite because typically for working on it, they identify cost savings, they identify operationally more efficient way of doing things because they're really digging into the risks of the company and getting ahead of it. And so they identify that there are better ways to do things. In terms of cost savings, there are things like energy, waste that they can also save on. And then they also identify that, maybe there's another there's a way that I can tweak or I can adapt or I can invent a product or a service that caters to what a client's asking for. And that's sometimes a new revenue stream, etc. So that's one of the main things. The other is that as a small and medium-sized company, they sometimes feel like, well, I don't have to do anything. This is really up to larger companies, but small and medium-sized companies represent 99.8% of all businesses in Canada. And they are responsible for about 40% of all emissions in Canada, right? And it seems reasonable to think that if Canada has a plan and has to meet that plan, that small and medium-sized businesses will have to do something at some point. So those are some of the, apart from the fact that it could be overwhelming as well, but those are two key ones that I can talk to right now.
So really, no business is too small to start with the sustainability.
No business is too small because every action counts. Every 0.1 of a degree that we're able to prevent our planet from warming matters. And small businesses, because there's so many of them, like I just said, and because they're so impactful, and usually they're core to the community, right? They can inspire, they can influence. And so together they can absolutely create change where other businesses are looking at the way they do things, or suppliers are looking at the way they do things, and customers are looking at the way they do things, and it inspires they themselves to act. So no, they're not. No business is too small. And by the way, every single business, no matter the size, has to think about how do I survive. And if there is a flood, and even if I stand, my employees perhaps can come to work because. So every single business has to think about it.
It's an interesting perspective to think about how it impacts not just the business, but the people and their ability to get to and from employment. Yeah, that's really thought provoking. So these small businesses, do you have some tips or advice on what they can do, small steps, cost efficient things to do to make themselves more sustainable?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is I'm a big believer in really just baseline. Find out where you're at, okay? It's nice to go switch things out and start doing things, but if you're not able to tell your story in terms of where you started from, what measurements you had in place and how you're working towards it, truly, you may have to start over in a few years if someone's asking you for a plan. So I think that's important. But there are things like truly just thinking about internally as a business, are there ways that we can reduce what we buy, reduce what we use? Instead of purchasing single-use type items, are there ways to buy things that you can reuse or recycle? Do you even have an internal recycling program? You'll be surprised how many don't have that. So just setting up that those are low-hanging fruit things. Like a lot of times can do it for very little cost. Think about ways in which you communicate. Are you printing all the time? Can you become more electronic? There's so many tools and applications out there to support you as a small business. Think about things like employees and how you do meetings and how you travel. Are you traveling, getting it, each of you in a car and driving somewhere for a meeting? Can you do more virtual type meetings? Those are some of the ways that they can start that really does not cost a lot, right? But just internally. And by the way, also think about education. So internally, if this is something you want to work at, do your employees understand the whys? Why you're doing it, why it aligns to your strategy, why it's important. So think about how you can educate them and bring them along, because often they've got great ideas that will also help you.
Those were some great tips. Thank you for sharing those. You started by saying, though, that businesses should start with sort of a bench line, know where they're at. What things are we measuring? Are we measuring like what our energy usage is, or how do we start creating that bench line?
Yeah. So there are a couple. The first is I've got a quick assessment, for example, that I do. And it's really in light of environmentally, what are some of the things that you're doing? Socially, what are some of the things that you're doing? And governance wise, what are some of the things you're doing? So, for example, just really asking questions about if there's waste, how do you get rid of it? Is there anything hazardous that you need to be thinking about? How much water are you using? Are you repurposing, the usage of water? So those lights, right? What sort of lighting are you using? So that's one example. So there are just a number of questions that you ask, and the outcome is, so I'm great here, but I have an opportunity here. The same thing with socials. In terms of your employees, how are you hiring them? How are you training them? How are you rewarding them? Do you have a health and safety in place? Has a policy in place, and governance all around how you're managing the company, and making sure that there's no corruption, that you think about who you're dealing with, and that you're choosing reputable type companies. Thinking about even going back to environmental, like are you sourcing sustainably? Are you sourcing locally? Those are some of the things that we look at. And then once you get into like an actual full audit, now you're talking about, let's calculate and truly understand what your greenhouse gas emission is. And so that's more involved, because now we're looking at you as a company, your buildings, your your autos. We're looking at the energy that you purchase, as well as upstream, downstream. So from manufacturing all the way to your customer, how much you're outputting. And so that's more involved, and that takes more time. But those are some of the assessments that we'll do.
That's interesting. So you can start at the base level and then go wherever that you need to go. But just assessing what you're currently doing, what your policies and what your waste generated and things are to start.
Yeah, I always encourage a baseline assessment, the simpler one, because that typically gets a business owner to understand where they're at, and then they can decide, there are certain things that I can do internally, and then there's certain things where I need help. And that's really, that's why I think it's important.
Okay. So businesses, want to implement this. They want to do right, do the right things. So how can they tell the public that they are doing the right things, but while avoiding greenwashing?
That's so important, greenwashing, because actually, Canada, I believe it's Bill C-59, just in the I think it's the Competition Act, just added greenwashing. And so if you're a company, and right now, perhaps you've been doing the right things.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not sure I know what greenwashing really means.
So greenwashing really, because sustainability before, when we talked about it, was all about my brand, had nothing to do with measures and all, right? And so it's really about me telling a story that says, hey, I'm good. I'm good for the environment. I'm good for the society. I'm doing the right thing. So greenwashing is saying that without actually doing, right, what you need to be environmentally friendly. Okay. And so I may say my product's environmentally friendly, but truly is it? And companies have been getting into trouble, right, because of it. And sometimes that's another reason that folks may shy away from saying, I don't want to do that, right? But I'll say, greenwashing, going back to the act, says, look, if you're going to say that your business, your product or service, your activities are environmentally friendly, you're going to have to back it up with data and facts, right? And so I say, just be honest and be authentic and transparent about it. And that's why, truly baselining is so important, because you're able to say, here's where we're at. Okay. Here are the things we chose to work on, because you cannot work on 20 things at once. And then you're able to tell your story along the way, because this is not a once and done. It is a journey. You're able on an annual basis to tell that story of, here's what we worked at, here's what we achieved, here's really where we planned to get there, but we didn't get there, and here's why, and here's where we're going. That's super important for people to understand what you're actually doing.
Oh, that makes sense. I'd heard the term so many times.
Oh, yeah.
Thinking I didn't know if I actually understood its meaning. So, yeah, that's basically having your actions matching what you're saying, right? And that's so important in everything. That comes back to values and honesty and integrity from a business, right?
Absolutely. And it's kind of tough that that we have to say it. But sometimes it's not intentional.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am a business that's truly doing these things, and I am truly environmentally friendly. I just haven't done the work to calculate and understand where I was at and how I've moved the bar. And so now I'm in this situation where I have to do that, right? So that's why I keep saying, before you do any work, before you pay to do anything at all, understand where you're at, because to move the bar, what gets measured gets done. And you're going to be able to tell your story in a much better way if you do so.
Fantastic. Do you have any additional advice for small businesses or anything else you'd like to share?
For small businesses, I will say that, first of all, there are resources and tools out there to help you. So do not be overwhelmed by this. And you'd be surprised at how many solutions are already out there. So think about and look for those types of resources to help you. Also, based on your industry, some industry associations, etc., have got certain support systems in place to help you if you want to work on sustainability. Networks also important. There are a number of companies that are set up. They're not for profit. So sometimes there's a small membership fee, but a lot of times they're free. And there are a number of webinars and sessions that you can attend and really just learn. And a number of them will help you as well if you have questions. And then there are folks like me that once you decide that, okay, I really need to, to do this, and I want to go through it methodically, and I really need to be able to document and report and tell the story. There are people like me that will also help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciated hearing from you. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Good Business Dufferin podcast. Thank you again, Sharon, for sharing your expertise and insights and practical tips for small businesses. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to this episode's sponsor, E. Hoffman Plastics, for their generous support in this important conversation. Remember, even small changes can lead to big results, both for your business and for our community. If you're ready to start your sustainability journey, take that first step. Whether it's reaching out for guidance and making a simple change or committing to long-term goals. Together, we can build a more sustainable, inclusive, and thriving Dufferin County. Stay connected with the Dufferin Board of Trade for more resources, events, and future episodes. Until next time, keep driving positive change, because good business is good for everyone.
E. Hoffman Plastics. We're more than plastics, we're a technology company delivering superior products with consistent quality at any capacity. Different is what we do.